Hello and welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute-a-day podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse, recorded here in the dining room of the Bible Bistro, located in Sharonville, Ohio. Hey there friends, welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro, and today we're looking at Psalm 5 verses 8 and 9. Is that right? Yep, 8 and 9. So what do you pray about when you pray? We learned about the elements of prayer. We learned about our condition and God's mercy, which opens the door for us to pray. And now in verses 8 through 12, so today and tomorrow, I'm going to give you 5 things that I see as subjects of prayer, that David gives us here as subjects of prayer. Now, you can probably go through these 5 verses and find, 10 things or 11 things or 12 things. There's no telling what you could find as you study and meditate on these verses. But let me just give you the 5 things that I see that David gives to us as subjects of prayer. So, just to review, verses 1 through 3 laid out the basics of prayer, the elements basic to prayer. Verses 4 through 6 outlined our condition. Verse 7 is the gateway. This is God's mercy, which allows us to enter His house, stand before His throne, worship at His holy temple in His fear. Now in verses 8 through 12, we have the subjects of prayer. So let me read for you today verses 8 and 9. O Lord, lead me in your righteousness because of my enemies. Make straight before me your way. For there is nothing reliable in his mouth. Their inward parts are profane. Their throat is an open grave. Their tongue flatters. All right. So what do we have here? Number 1, the very first subject of prayer is in verse 8. Lord, lead me in your righteousness because of my enemies. So there is a broad way and there is a narrow way. And we want to walk on the narrow way. And so if we want to walk on the narrow way, what are we going to do? We're going to ask God to lead us in that way, in your righteousness. Because there's an enemy out there, and he wants to attack us as we are in the Lord's way, so we pray that God would lead us in that way. Lead me in your righteousness because of my enemies. Make straight before me your way. So the Lord is doing that work. The enemy is a constant theme in David's writing in the Psalms. He has so many enemies, and we've sort of gone over some of those before, especially in Psalm 3. We talked about, because that was about Absalom, and we've talked about all of the enemies that David had, from Absalom to Bichri to Saul to all, there's Absalom, so many of them were against him, Naboth and so forth. So we understand that during David's time, he had plenty of enemies, and so we might as well. But I want to focus our attention in this section not on a human that is our enemy or someone who is against us, but the man on the inside, the one that was described in verses 4 through 6, who would try to trip us up in God's way. Look at verse 9. There is nothing reliable in his mouth. Who's the his there? Who's the enemy there in verse 8? Well, you go back up to 6, 5, and 4. We have the wickedness, the evil, the foolish, the workers of iniquity, the bloody and deceitful man. And we said when we were studying 4 through 6, this is our condition. This is the old man. This is the man who is unregenerate. This is that thing on the inside of us that wars against the Spirit of God. So when we pray, we can pray against the man who is warring against God's way in us. That is the old man. There's nothing reliable in his mouth. His inward parts are profane. His throat is an open grave, the tongue that flatters. All of that is true. And as we fight the good fight against sin, prayer becomes our primary weapon and our primary platform for that fight. So we have, number 1, asking God to lead us in His way, and number 2, asking him to fight against the old man. Those are the first two subjects of prayer. Join me again tomorrow. We're going to look at verses 10 through 12 and pick up the last three subjects of prayer here on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. For more fresh and delicious Bible studies, podcasts, books, and more, check out the Bible Bistro online and on YouTube. Join me again next time for Daily Dose Radio.